day out there to all my listeners, and I'd like to welcome you to Is Your Way in Your Way podcast. And I'm your host, Cassandra Crawley Mayo. And for my new listeners out there, let me share a bit about what this podcast is all about. Not only is the title of my book called Is Your Way in Your Way, so is the podcast. And this is for individuals who are stuck in life. There's certain things that you want to do, but you can't seem to get there. It's kind of like, okay, now what? Your life is kind of like a routine on automatic pilot. Some of you want to be promoted. You want to get out of a toxic relationship. You want to forgive somebody. You want to be an entrepreneur. You want to write a book. It's a gamut of things that you want to do, but it's not happening. So this podcast, we talk about topics related to personal and business development, and it will also enable you to do some self-reflection. And today, our topic is 3 relationship dynamics that everyone ought to know. So we're going to talk about relationships, and I don't think anyone on this podcast would not even want to hear about relationships. Relationships are critical. And my special guest to talk about that is Shelley Lewin. Good day, Shelley. How are you?
Hello. How lovely to be here. Thank you, Cassandra.
Yes, and Shelley is coming from South Africa. Isn't that amazing that I get to have guests that are all over the world? I think that's fascinating. Now, before I do a deep dive and interview Shelley, I want to tell you a little bit about her. She is known as the relationship architect. She is a master's in designing and enhancing the art of relationships with over 5,000 leadership coaching sessions under her belt. She has uncovered a unique synergy between personal and professional connections that can elevate all aspects of life. Her mission is simple, yet it's very powerful, and that is to help leaders at home or in the workplace build healthier, more fulfilling relationships with themselves and others. Her expertise has been featured in various media outlets, and her book, Uncomplicated Love, offers practical wisdom for creating lasting, meaningful connections. Wow. I am so looking forward to this, and I can tell my listeners are as well, because we all have had some
Yeah,
challenges.
there's the book.
That's the book. Uncomplicated Love, a step-by-step guide for building a thriving relationship. Wow. Thank you, Shelley. Let me ask you this. Tell us, before you started this relationship thing, give us a little history about your backstory. Your backstory, like your childhood. What was going on back then?
Okay, so I do think that sometimes your greatest wound can become your greatest power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, if you're willing to do the work, then you can transform even horrible trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so comparatively, I'm sure there's people out there that have had a way worse childhood. So I'm not out here to say feel sorry for me. It was horrible. What I can tell you is that I didn't have great role models for
Yes.
for what healthy relationships should look like. I had one parent who was an alcoholic as well, and so emotionally unavailable and very unpredictable. You just never really knew who was going to be in the room, which makes a child feel very unsafe. So there was all sorts of things that were going on when I was a child. And unfortunately, my father, your first relationship that you develop is so your parent who represents for you. So my father, in my case, and my relationship with him is the first real relationship that you have. So when you, as a woman who's heterosexual, who's going into my adult life, then I'm unconsciously going to be comfortable with that type of dynamic. As a child, you grow up and you think, okay, so what's normal is this type of dynamic, where you're treated
Yes.
badly and this person is not around for you emotionally or physically, and so that then when you become an adult, depending on your childhood upbringing, determines what your expectations are for a partner in your adult life.
Hmm.
So because I had very little healthy, I'm going to say healthy expectations,
Yes.
so I then got into relationships. In fact, there's a whole body of therapy called imago therapy. And imago therapy is that you seek to build a relationship in the image of your parent.
Now,
In the
how do you
image,
spell? What's the name of that? A model?
imago, Imago. So imago therapy is a very specific type of therapy that
Uh-huh.
understands that we seek as adults to heal the wounds of our childhood. So you
Mm.
will be attracted to a partner as an adult that resembles the relationship you had as a child. So if that wasn't a healthy, functional relationship, it's no surprise then that you are attracted into relationships that are not good for you, that are unhealthy.
Oh,
And so,
Shelley, I love that. Hold on one second because I want to reiterate that with my listeners. Everyone on this that listening have a mother and a father. Okay, now
or
one
a
of them
caregiver, it could be any caregiver. So you might not
may,
have had a mother or father. It could just be a grandparent or a caregiver.
exactly that you're raised by, and it's just so interesting how our childhood can predict a lot of what's going on in our adulthood. And if nothing else
Absolutely.
that you hear is just know that perhaps the relationships you are in, the relationships you have been in, is a could be a replicate of what that role model of a man was back in your
Exactly.
life. So I just
Exactly.
wanted to reiterate that.
Absolutely. And so if you aren't aware of that, then you will consistently find yourself in unhealthy,
Mhm.
unfulfilling relationships, and it becomes a pattern.
Mhm.
You wonder why am I always attracted to these men that treat me badly,
Yes.
and it's because there's familiarity there. So
Yes.
the idea is that relationships are an opportunity for you to heal your childhood wounds. That you
Good.
need to go into it knowing, knowing that.
Yes.
Otherwise, you just end up stuck in a really destructive relationship. So I've had my fair share of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. I love that perspective though. Say that again, like relationships,
They're
you
an opportunity to heal your
right.
childhood wounds. And
Awesome.
so what happens though is I think that if you become very attached,
Mhm.
so if you become very attached, and there's a whole body of work also known as attachment theory. So
Mhm.
if you're not familiar with that, it's a good thing to explore. So
Okay.
attachment theory states that there are three ways in which we attach to people. And those are the three dynamics that
Okay.
I mentioned.
Okay.
And so the three dynamics, so I'm going to, for the sake of visuals, to make it easier, I'm going to imagine these two circles,
Okay.
okay?
Mhm.
So one circle represents one person and one circle represents another person. So there's
Okay.
a me and a you. All right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
when two people meet and they meet, that little place where they overlap, that place in the middle, you can see this little section, that's
Yeah.
little sort of this section here.
Sure.
Okay. So that is where we attach. So I'm going to share the three dynamics. So the
Okay.
first dynamic, which which where you have equal, the circles are each overlapping, but in a up to the halfway point. So there's this healthy us. So there's a me, a you, and that middle section is
Mhm.
known as the third entity. It's the
Mm.
us, it's the relationship. So 1 + 1 = 3. Are you with me? There's
Okay.
three entities. Now,
Okay.
that relationship is where you attach to another person. So if you are looking for somebody, so when I mentioned there's 3 dynamics, think of it like this. There's this, which is I still have a strong sense of me and my identity, and the other person still has a strong sense of themselves and their identity.
Yes.
And where we overlap is a healthy, it's known as interdependence. Okay. Then we have this dynamic, which is where I lose my sense of self. So you can see the us, this us space becomes all encompassing. There's a tiny little sliver of me and my identity, and I lose my sense of self, and that is known as insecure attachment, also known as anxious attachment. So what happens is people that are anxiously attached fear abandonment. It's almost like they enmesh. They become the relationship. They become completely identified with the relationship. So if the relationship is going well, I'm happy.
Yes.
If the relationship is not going well, I can't function because my whole identity is tied up in the relationship.
Wow.
So and then the third one is where you have this, where you have independent relationships. So we've got codependent, where you completely overlap, interdependent, which is known as secure attachment, and then the third, also known as insecure, is when these 2 little circles are just overlapping. But what you have here is 2 or 1 fiercely independent. This person who wants to the idea is, I don't need a man. I am capable of being by myself and standing on my own 2 feet. And so what happens is you want to be in a relationship, so you let this person in a little bit. But then when things get difficult, you pull back. And then so it creates this push-pull where the person tries to come in and build a stronger relationship, and you pull back. Then they croak in, and then you pull back. So there's this sort of push-pull. That's independent. And usually, so each of these dynamics has its own feel or flavor. So for example, with the independent one, where you've got this little, these 2 people, that it's usually defined by indifference. It's kind of like, if you're there, you're there. If you're not there, you're not there. I couldn't really care less, do what you want to do. And so that relationship, if you have 1 or 2 people, usually you won't have 2, because if you have 2 indifferent people, then neither could be bothered
Okay.
to make the relationship work. So usually you'll have 1 who's, and of course, as the universe works, you usually have 1 who's indifferent, who's attracted to the anxious one, who wants to become completely absorbed in the relationship. So then this dynamic keeps happening, where there's a push and a pull and a push and a pull. And that is how we describe power struggles. So whenever there's a power struggle, and if you could define your relationship as having power struggles, it's usually because you have 1 person who couldn't care less and 1 person who's careful. So you have a careful, full of care about what I say and I do, because I don't want to upset you. I'm happy to walk on eggshells because I don't want to bother, or upset you, because I am identified with the relationship. And then the person who's indifferent, who couldn't care less, it creates this power dynamic and struggle between the 2. And so what we're trying to do, so when a couple come to see me, I know you mentioned the working with leaders. I talk about working in leaders of businesses and leaders of homes, so usually parents. So, and so when I had a private practice for 20 years, And when I'm working with couples, what I'm trying to discern when I meet my couple is, am I working with this dynamic where they're so enmeshed that what I'm trying to do is to give them each more independence and to
Okay.
pull them apart, or one more independence, or are they over here and I need to try and help them to feel less suffocated.
Uh-huh.
So and all of that comes down to this attachment theory, which is that when you grew up in a home, if your parents were there for you emotionally
Mm-hmm.
and were available to you,
Mm-hmm.
you learned that it's safe to be in an intimate relationship.
Okay.
If they were not there for you and you had to you had to sort of perform tricks, or be the funny one, or be the super bright one, or be the responsible one, or you had to figure out how to get your partner's love and attention,
Mm-hmm.
then you will have an insecure attachment. You're going to be worried that that person isn't going to be there for you.
Mm.
So what happens is, when you're in a relationship, you become very clingy because
Yeah.
you're fearful
Yeah, they're
that
gonna
they're
leave.
going to leave you.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
so this whole these dynamics play out in relationships. And this, what we call this interdependent one, which is the healthy, secure attachment style,
Mm-hmm.
is somebody who recognizes that if the relationship isn't going well,
Yes.
that it's okay, that we can figure it out. And if it is consistently causing suffering, if we can't seem to get this relationship to work, they are more comfortable to step away from the relationship if there's a lot of suffering involved, or a lot of drama and angst involved in the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
because they know it's okay, I'll find somebody else, I'll move on. So it's not that they necessarily love the other person less, it's just that they love themselves more. They aren't willing to put themselves through all that drama and endless
Right.
fighting and conflict, because they know that they will be fine on their own. Then they'll meet someone who for whom it's mutually delightful. It
Mm-hmm.
will be that they're not worried about losing somebody, because they know they'll be fine.
Right. Oh wow, that's interesting because you made me go back to my past, and I guess you could have been my therapist then too. I had so many of them, and I had this the same push and pull. If they get close to me, I pull back. It was a
Okay, there you go.
constant. Yeah, it was a
Yes,
constant. It was a constant. And then, I found out, like you indicated, what was going on in my household as I was growing up.
yes,
Did not get that emotional attachment. It was emotionally unavailable on one end
yes.
of the spectrum, right?
Okay.
So you're right. It's kind of like I was, what can I do to get them to stay? And then when they
Yes.
stay, I'm like, I need to get out.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So it's around, so this attachment styles and attachment theory points to our capacity for vulnerability. And
Mm.
so if you have very little capacity for vulnerability, it's like you'll have it in brief moments, like you say,
Yeah,
I want you to stay and I
yeah,
have capacity, but only for a little bit, because then I start to feel a bit suffocated,
yeah.
and so then I push you away, and
Exactly.
then I feel like, oh no, I do want you around, and then I'm back in. So it's
Yes.
kind of like you reel the person in and then you
Yeah.
reel them out, then you reel them
Right.
in and you reel them out, which
Right.
creates a lot of ambivalence and insecurity
Mhm.
in a relationship. And so
Mhm.
there's this dynamic that plays out. And so the way out of that dynamic
Uh-huh.
is is to is actually to do the work, is to heal the wounds
Uh-huh.
from your childhood, and to you know to see how what went on in your childhood. And this isn't about blaming parents, it's about understanding the obstacle in
Yes.
order to overcome it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, most people, most parents, I'm a parent myself, we all just did and do the best we can with the information we have available to us
Yes,
at the time.
absolutely. I am
So,
so glad you said that, Shelley, because I have a chapter in my book that talks about your childhood. And I also say that at one time, as I was growing up, I was angry because I felt that was their fault. But as I
yes,
got older, like you said, I realized it's not their fault. It's just who they are. And imagine what they've been through. We don't know how their
exactly,
father or mother taught.
exactly,
Exactly. So it goes back. So like release yourself from that angst, that my parents, if it
exactly.
weren't for them,
Yes, I deserved better parents, or
exactly.
I should have had, there's some grieving that perhaps you can do for the parents that you wish you had that didn't have,
Right.
and how they could have been better, taking care of you better and didn't. So it's kind of like grieve the loss of the parents you didn't have in some ways,
Hmm.
and to accept or come to find a place of acceptance as an adult
Yes.
that they were
Absolutely.
doing the best they could. And
Exactly.
there's this saying, hurt people.
People. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so they only repeated often what they got in their childhood. And so the
Exactly.
idea is that we're reaching an age, I believe, in an era where we are inviting people to be cycle breakers, to break the cycle of,
Mm.
post-generational trauma. So,
Mm.
my great, great, great grandparents may have behaved being alcoholics, and that was what their
Exactly.
great
Mhm.
grandparents saw and experienced,
Mhm.
and it got passed down and passed down and passed down, and it just repeats. The pattern just keeps repeating
Yes.
until one day someone says, it stops with me.
Mhm.
That's it. It
I love
stops
it.
with me.
Mhm.
I'm not going to continue the cycle. But you
Yes.
have to know what the cycle is and choose to break the cycle.
Yes. And then, the news is always bad news. That's how they get their ratings. And I've heard more about relationships, whereas the female or the male gets so angry, they will kill the other
Uh,
person because they don't want,
yes.
I mean, it's just getting crazy. And did you attract that? And I think about, because it's like a mirror. Look at yourself in the mirror. Are you attracting that type of behavior? When you counsel couples, or not couples, or individuals that are really wanting to get in what I call a healthy relationship, what are the common themes that you find from couples in regards to relationship? What are the challenges that they're
So,
having?
okay, so there are three what I would call domains where there's going to be challenges. There are three core domains.
Okay.
So, you mentioned earlier about the art of love. So, actually, I speak about the art, science, and practices of love.
Yes.
Okay. So, those three: art, science, and practice. So, when I talk about art, I'm talking about the art of compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
So compatibility is not we have common interests. Compatibility is that I can be myself
Mm.
fully in this
Okay.
relationship,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't have to play small, that I
Yes.
can be who I want
I
and
love
who
that.
I am, and
Mhm.
my partner will celebrate who I am and allow me to be who I am. So it's a it's a it's a great compatibility when you can be yourself, and you can, you know, your partner
Mhm.
supports, encourages, and
Mhm.
challenges you to be as expansive as possible. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's the compatibility piece.
Okay.
Then there's the science, which I
Mhm.
mentioned, which is the science of intimacy. And
Mhm.
that's attachment theory, which I've just mentioned to you. So
Yes.
your attachment style can cause problems in relationship because if you're compatible, fantastic. But if you have this dynamic that's playing out in your relationship with the push pull, and so it affects your levels of intimacy and your capacity for vulnerability, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
that's the second domain. So
yes.
when a couple comes to me, I will have them do an attachment style assessment to
Mm-hmm,
see, is that going to show up in the relationship space? Because that
mm-hmm,
might be the core problem. It's not compatibility. It could be intimacy and issues with vulnerability and unable or low capacity for vulnerability.
mm-hmm.
So that's the second domain.
Okay.
The third domain is the practices of love, which is partnership. So, relationship is a partnership. You are a small team of two.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in a partnership, you cannot expect an A team quality power partnership and show up as a D team player. So if
Mm.
you want to be in an A team partnership, you have to be an A team player yourself.
Okay.
And if you think about any sport, did you play any sport at school or in college, or have you ever played any sport yourself?
I wasn't a sport person. I was a girly girl.
Okay. Me too. Funny enough, I was a ballerina. And
Yeah,
you know,
so
it's
was I.
funny.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So because I did ballet and I never played any team sports, I
Mhm.
actually think that I didn't grow up understanding this idea of team,
Okay.
and
Okay.
so I find that people that play sports, that have played in a team sport, have
Mhm.
an advantage because they understand this idea of sometimes it's not about you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Sometimes it's about what's best for the team. And so
Uh-huh.
that was one of my biggest challenges personally, is I went into a relationship really with struggling with this. So I had my personal attachment style was independent. So I had this, I wouldn't let anybody in. So I
Um,
had to learn to be
yeah.
vulnerable and let people in. So that was
Yes.
part of my growth journey.
Uh-huh.
And then the partnership piece was learning to be a team player. And
Uh,
that's a skill that we can all learn. So for example, communication, learning to communicate,
mhm.
expressing yourself, asking for what you want, saying how you feel. Communication is a skill, and it's a skill that's required in partnership.
Yes.
So if you want to have a quality partnership, then it's on you to become a quality communicator. And if
Mhm.
you are, so many people will say, oh, you know, I'm not good at communicating, like full stop, like as if, okay, well, that's like saying to someone who's joining, the basketball team, I'm terrible with basketballs, full stop. Like,
Okay.
well, then don't play basketball. If you don't want to be,
Right.
what, how is that attitude going to serve you in this basketball team? So,
Yeah.
great. So, what you would rather say instead is, I haven't been great with basketballs up until this point, but my plan is to become really skillful with the basketball because I
Right.
really want to be in this team. So,
Okay.
so if you're not a great communicator, fine, you haven't been, but your plan is to become a better communicator. Because if you want to have a great relationship, that's part of what's required for partnership. So, there's a handful of partnership skills
Yes.
that will be really useful, like communicating, like being trustworthy.
Yes.
Being
Mhm.
trustworthy is a skill that's very important if you're in a team.
Yes.
Your partner needs to know that they can depend on you, that you're reliable. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. Otherwise, it's not really a partnership, is it? If I'm
Mhm.
unreliable and I don't do what
Right.
I
Don't
so
trust.
so so exactly. So you see what I mean by that there are certain skills that we can acknowledge and learn that even if you haven't been great at it, which I definitely wasn't, and my husband came from a sporting background, so he was a fantastic team player, and
Uh-huh.
he helped me to
Uh-huh.
become a better partner because he understood this concept of being a teammate,
Okay.
which I
Uh-huh.
was completely over my head at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Oh my gosh, that must be my problem.
So, I've been married now for 20 years.
Yeah.
So it took a long time. And I would say that I would I was at least aware that I wasn't a very good team player. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have watched and observed and
Mm-hmm.
seen what it actually looks like, and would watch sport to see
Mm.
and listen to
Okay.
coaches and hear what are the qualities of a great team, a winning team. And I
Mm-hmm.
I ask anyone, find a successful team in any sport
Yeah.
and observe the behaviors and the trust and the communication and
Uh-huh.
the collaboration that goes on, and how they navigate conflict. And there's all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things that go on in a high performing team,
Mm.
whether it's sport or at work.
Yes, that's true.
And so those same skills apply in any relationship, is to show up as a quality partner at the end of the day.
Right. And I read somewhere where you had limiting beliefs. Okay, which we all
Yes,
do. We all do. And
yes,
and it appears that our backgrounds are similar. And of course, so I have the limiting beliefs, and I had challenges in my relationship that, where you get to a point where I think I need some help. I think I need to go to therapy or something because I don't like how my relationships are working or not working. So is it me? Of course, in the beginning, it couldn't have been me, or was it them? And I noticed that you had a coach to help you with your
yes,
limiting beliefs to explore different perspectives so that you can get out of your own way and craft the life that is an extension of the expression of who you are.
yes.
So what was some of the things that the coach did to help you? Well, first of all, what were your limiting beliefs? What was a couple of them? I know we have quite a few.
So there's a
Yeah.
handful. So I'll give you an example. So I thought vulnerability was a weakness, for
Uh-huh.
example.
Okay.
Okay. So, which is problematic because intimacy requires vulnerability. So, if I see vulnerability as a weakness, then I'm going to be avoiding vulnerability, which isn't going to allow intimacy to happen. So,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
what I needed to understand is that vulnerability actually requires huge amounts of courage. So I had to reframe and reshift and have a new relationship with vulnerability, because to reveal yourself to another exposes you and puts you at risk of being hurt. So it's actually a very brave thing to do.
Mhm. Yes.
So that's an example of one. Another limiting belief, gosh, there were so many. A lot of them was around the opposite sex. So,
Mhm.
men are
Mhm.
unreliable, men are this, men are that. So
Mhm.
there was multiple that was linked to gender,
Yes.
about what,
About
and not
men.
very, yeah, a
Mhm.
negative about, and these narratives, these stories that I was telling myself.
Mhm.
If that's what I truly believed, then it's not a surprise that I was permanently pushing somebody away, if that's what I really believe. So when you ask the question, is how you first have to catch yourself and
Mhm.
find those narratives or the stories. You have to catch them first and find them. What must I believe to be true,
Yes.
in that moment, in order for me or for this to be happening, to really be self-reflective and to think,
Mhm.
what do I really actually believe about men, or about relationships, or about
Mhm.
love, or
Mm-hmm.
about this person or about myself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you catch it and then
Mm-hmm.
you challenge it.
Mm-hmm.
So, is that true? Is it
Mm-hmm.
really true? What else could be true? So, so one of the ones is that's quite common is this idea that my partner is responsible to make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
So that idea is actually, it's not, it's a limiting belief.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I am responsible for creating a life that is meaningful
Yes.
and fulfilling to me.
Yes.
So,
Uh-huh.
and that belief comes from that dynamic. It comes from that codependent where you think this relationship must make me happy. No, the relationship can
Right.
add value. It can
Right.
add a bit of value, but you fundamentally need to be whole and complete and happy yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so and also this idea of when I find the right one,
Mm-hmm.
then we'll live happily ever after.
Never. That's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a limiting belief because
Mm-hmm.
relationships, exceptional relationships are not found, they're built.
Yeah.
So you build it when you show up as a quality
Mm-hmm.
partner with
Mm-hmm.
someone who you're compatible with,
Yes.
and when you have capacity for intimacy. So
Yes.
you can see those three domains, the compatibility, the partnership, the intimacy, that it's an art, a science, and a practice. And when you
Mm-hmm.
understand that, then it's not about just this one person, 1 in 7 billion. I believe that there are hundreds of people that you could have a wonderful relationship with.
Yes.
There's
Mm-hmm.
loads of people that you could
Mm-hmm.
have a fantastic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what you need to be able to do is become someone for whom a healthy relationship is possible first.
Yes. Yeah.
So you yourself need to know, where are you getting in your own way?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And and then I hear the one, there's just not a lot of good men out there. I hear it all the time, and I'm like, but
Yes.
yes, it is. So you
Okay.
change that narrative.
Exactly.
There is a good men out there, and there's one
There
for
are
me.
millions of
Oh, they
fantastic men
are.
out
Yeah,
there.
they really are. But I used to say that, like, it's just no good. I don't think I ever said that there weren't any good men. I think for a while I knew that I needed to take care of me. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me.
Yes.
And what it really
Yes.
helped me, and I call it the ABC rule, that I use a detox, what I call limiting beliefs, to detox myself, was, as you indicated, acknowledge what is the belief. Like,
Yes.
acknowledge that, there are no good men out there. Then where did that belief come from? What's the origin of that belief?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then, like you indicated, create or change the narrative, of that,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
it's that, what you're saying, I
Yeah.
find it really profound for me,
I love
based
that
on,
yours was a 3-step as well. So this 3-step mine was to catch yourself,
Mhm,
challenge yourself, and then you change it. So it's
mhm,
also like 3 steps. You have to observe it first,
mhm,
catch it, then question and challenge it, and
mhm,
then change. You
mhm.
know, so change it and to say, is this belief something that's going to serve me? How is it serving me? And sometimes it's almost like we put a full stop where it could be a
Yeah.
comma,
Yes.
like that idea of, I'm not great at communication, full stop. Well, instead of that, that's a limiting belief. You could have instead say, I haven't been great at communication,
Mhm.
comma, and I'm getting better every day. That kind of
Exactly. 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 Change that narrative. What I find interesting is one of the questions I was going to ask. Now, you haven't mentioned this, but I know you were a model. Is that
thing.
correct? Right.
Yes,
So,
back in the
and
day.
then, that was your prior life, I'll say,
Yes,
somewhat.
yes.
And so, what was the tipping point doing your modeling that made you pivot and change to this work that you're doing?
So it was very lucrative, that work,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't very fulfilling.
Mm, nice.
Have I lost you for a moment? I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I
if
mean,
you can
yeah, I
hear
mean,
me.
it's amazing how we can
Oh,
do
there we
this. And
go. So
okay,
I was saying,
yeah,
so yes, so to answer your question, what made me pivot? There were two things. The one was that I um, after 13 years of modeling, I had my son. So I
mhm,
was ready to
mhm,
evolve into something different. In my early 30s, I was ready to have a different career.
mhm,
I sort of was over it by then.
mhm.
And also, I it wasn't very fulfilling. So it
Yeah,
was lucrative and
yeah,
glamorous, sort of, but it was, there's only so much you can. When someone says, I don't need to hear your opinion, darling, just stand there and smile.
right.
No one,
Uh-huh.
it's only about looks. And I would
Mhm,
be told frequently, we're not paying you for your thinking. We don't really want to hear what you have to say. Just keep
mhm,
quiet and smile.
mhm, mhm.
And it was very, to me, you know, quite, that's the job. Sure, I get
Yeah,
it. But I just often felt like I was treated like like a
like a,
mannequin.
I was getting ready to say that, like a mannequin. Yeah, I was getting ready to say that. Yeah.
Yes, and there was
Uh-huh.
too much going on in between these two
Mhm,
years
mhm,
to just stay silent all the time and to
mhm,
stand and
mhm.
smile, stand
Yeah.
and smile.
Yeah, exactly. And I asked that question because this podcast is also about individuals that are stuck. They're doing something that it's really not working for them, but it's so
Mm,
tough to get out of it. It's just like in a relationship. It's not good for you, but you just can't seem to move. It can't just seem, and I think that's with a lot of people. You're so used to in your comfort zone. So that's why I asked you, what was it to enable you to pivot and start doing what you're currently doing?
oh, I see. So look, to be fair, when I fell pregnant, I had the choice to pivot,
Hmm.
and I decided that I was going to change careers. So I did. I started a brand new career. I went back to school. I studied for 4 years, and I started from scratch. And
Hmm.
so I just wanted a different. I had I would say that. Um, that we often need to get over what we feel. So from the
Yeah.
point of view, there's feelings and there's choices. You might feel fear, you might
Right.
feel apprehensive, but you can still choose to do it anyway.
Right.
So I was fearful around changing my career and all of those things. I was terrified, but I just knew that that wasn't what I wanted for myself for the rest of my life. So I just
Mhm.
chose, regardless of what I felt, I
Yes.
chose the path that I wanted to be on.
That's good. That is so good. Wow. This I think that this podcast in regards to relationships is going to resonate with a lot of people
Hmm.
because we all are in relationships. So I
Absolutely,
just
absolutely.
like to commend you for the work, for the change you did, even though you were uncomfortable. You were like, oh, it's the modeling is lucrative, but is that
Yes,
meaningful? A lot of people do that because it's lucrative, it's safe, it's comfortable. I'm going to stay in this toxic relationship because can't find anyone else. That's a limiting belief,
yes,
or yeah,
exactly.
it's kind of like, well, that's how my mom and dad did. I'm realizing that my parents did this, my parents fought. So, okay. So once you get the therapy or whatever you need, a mentor, a coach to get
Mm.
you out of this, um, it's possible, because this is my thing. I I am on this mission that I want people to start living their best life on their
Absolutely.
terms, so they're going to have to mitigate those self-imposed barriers that's preventing them to move forward. Because what happens is when it's time for us to transition, we'll have regrets. We're not here for that. We're here, we're ordained,
Absolutely.
we have a gift just as you do. And if it took bad relationships to get to where you are today, what a blessing you are to so many people. I mean, that's incredible. And I just want to thank you for,
Oh,
yeah, your time,
thank
your
you.
expertise, what you're sharing, because this to me, for you, is fulfilling.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. And you
that's
know it's fulfilling when you're willing to do it, even if and that was the thing is I wanted to find something that I would do, whether I was getting paid or not, that I did
yes,
it because I was passionate about it. And
exactly.
that whether I won the lottery or didn't win the lottery or whatever, I would do it anyway. I would show up and
Right,
do it anyway, because
right.
then it's coming from your heart
Yes,
space,
yes.
and it's almost like it's just an self-expression.
Hmm.
So it's not paid productivity where someone's paying you to be productive.
Hmm.
It's paid
Right.
self-expression. I'm just being who I am and what I love and what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And so I encourage everybody to do that. And as you said, we're all born with gifts, and
Yes.
our journey is to discover what those are, and
Hmm.
to not allow relationships to keep us small, is to
Mm.
find someone to partner with who's
Hmm.
compatible to you, who wants you to shine, who wants you to thrive, who wants you to be your best self. That's
Yes.
what relationships, that's the blessing they can be, that they are mutually delightful.
Yes, exactly. And as you said, and for my listeners, you have to work for it. I mean, you cannot sit down and do nothing. Like this, you wish things could be like this, but you're not doing what. In other words, you're not taking action for it to get to the
Yes.
life that you want to. And action
Yes.
is critical. And then once you take it, you got to be resilient with it. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. And you never stop learning. I
yeah.
teach communication and I'm still
Mhm.
learning about how to be a better communicator.
Yeah, yeah. So, Shelley, how can my listeners get in touch with you?
So I have a website,
Hmm.
TRA Coaching, which is the relationship architect coaching.com. So
Okay.
tracoaching.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Hmm.
I'm on Instagram, which is at the relationship architect, the underscore relationship architect. So if you just look up the relationship architect, you'll find me all over the place. And
Hmm.
of course, my book is also available on
Right.
Amazon. So if you'd like to get a sense of the art, science, and practices, then Uncomplicated Love is a really great place to start.
Oh yeah, I love that. And I really wanted to dive into your book, but we're out of time. It was so many things that we could talk about, but I think what we discussed, our discussion was what was needed for the listeners that are listening today. And so,
Wonderful. Thank
Shelley,
you so much.
yeah, thank you. And listeners, please share this podcast with someone that you know that could benefit from it, that it'll be their best interest. And also, please subscribe. This podcast goes live every Wednesday at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can see this podcast on all podcast platforms if you don't see it live. So, again, Shelley, thank you. My listeners, bye for now. And God bless you. And don't forget those 3 relationship dynamics. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye bye.